This is the editor's take with Raghuvir Srinivasan.
Hello.
Raghuvir, welcome to this special transmission of BL Budget on Budget 2022.
Thank you.
In 30 seconds, how do you appraise Nirmala Sitharaman's fourth effort?
It's the shortest speech ever of all the budgets that she's handled. But she's packed quite a punch in that 1.5 hours that she spoke. It's a growth-oriented budget. It's something that she's answered all the requests that's come from the markets, from the corporate sector, and from industry. Capital expenditures up 35%, which is unprecedented. 7.5 lakh crores from the center, and another 1 lakh crore given to the states for this purpose specifically. And it's so to say Capex Mahotsav.
Right.
Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla was referring to that last week, and it's almost as if she heard him and she's delivered a Capex Mahotsav.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like he had some inside information on what was going to happen in the budget.
Yeah.
Besides brevity being a clear virtue of this budget speech, do you think this is a bold risk-taking budget, as some people are suggesting? Because she's splurging on capital expenditure on big-ticket infrastructure projects. The spending is going up by as much as 35%, and she seems to be solely banking on tax buoyancy. Is that a big risk the finance minister is taking?
Well, I wouldn't think so, going by the experience of the last 1 year. Remember, the second pandemic wave hit us in this financial year, and the third one as well. Mm-hmm. And despite that, revenues are highly buoyant. It's running well above budgeted expectations. So if this trend continues, if the economy continues to perform, I think the tax calculations can be termed as realistic. Mm-hmm. Now, I wouldn't say she's splurging, because expenditure is up only 4% total expenditure. So it's not an expansionary budget by any
terms. Is this a rationalization of expenditure? Allocating
yes, it is a rationalization of expenditure. There's more money going into capital spending, into infrastructure, while her hands are tied with revenue expenditure. There are certain things which she can't control, like interest payments, salary payments, pension payments. Now, these things have to be paid for by the government, irrespective of whether you have the money or not. Mm-hmm. So, given those constraints, she has maximized what she can on capital spending.
Mm-hmm. In our edit meeting just a few minutes ago, we were discussing, why there hasn't been any palliative for the poor, for the really poor and the lower middle classes who've suffered the brunt of the COVID lockdowns. So this splurge on infrastructure should create enough jobs for the rural economy and the poor to benefit.
See, that's pretty much the philosophy of a right-wing government, right? Yeah, they don't believe in handouts. They don't believe in giving out doles. They believe in pushing growth, and in the hope that they'll, bring up all boats when the growth comes up. That's one way of. That's a philosophy. So we can't question that. It's just as a left or a socialist government would say, I believe in giving out income to subsidize the poor. That said, I think this government has not really taken very well to the idea of a universal basic income, which was suggested 2-3 years ago in the economic survey. They have always felt that they should push on the supply side and hope that the resultant growth will bring in jobs, as you said. But even then, this government has indeed helped out the poor during the pandemic by giving out free help in terms of in kind, like free food grains are still continuing. They're going to continue until the end of this fiscal year, and they're transferring money to the farmers every quarter. That is also a handout, right? In one sense.
So I asked. Because the Prime Minister is a big believer in the JAM stack, the Jandan accounts and financial inclusion, and there are lots of noises, about the government believing in direct benefit transfers, rather than giving subsidies, indirect subsidies.
Correct. They believe in direct benefit transfers, and they think they want to leverage on the technology that is available. to ensure there is no leakages and the money reaches the people for whom it's intended. And that's the philosophy of this government. As I said, they don't believe in handouts. So if you are if you're thinking of why not a UBI for the urban poor, like the Narega is there for the rural poor, I think you'll be disappointed because that's not their philosophy. That's pretty much that you come to accept. So saying that you expect this from a BJP government in a budget is, I think, it's not realistic to expect that.
What does this big expenditure on infrastructure, what does it do to fiscal deficit and inflation?
Well, fiscal deficit,
last year you could say that the government had a bit of license, given the pandemic and the necessity to spend on healthcare and vaccines, that nobody was really bothering about the fiscal deficit number. Does that theory hold this year, or are we in worrisome territory at 6.8%?
I wouldn't say 6.8% is very high, no question about that. In absolute terms, 6.8% would have been unthinkable. But you're living in very abnormal times where the new normal is spending as much as you can. Governments the world over have thrown fiscal deficit targets into the dustbin, just as this government has. Now, whether that is good or bad, I don't know. That will come. The chicken will come home to roost in the next few years when all the money that you spent pushes up inflation and all the other macroeconomic variables start showing signs. But at this point in time, you need to spend because private investment is not happening. Public consumption is quite tepid. So who is going to spend to bring up the economy back on its rails? It can only be the government, which is what they've been doing. They did it last year, they're doing it this year again. So fiscal deficit 6.8% was the target last year, which they have exceeded. It's become 6.9%. And for the next fiscal is going to be 6.4%. So they have shown some improvement, 0.5 percentage points lower, but a fiscal hawk would have none of it. They would shoot for a much lower fiscal deficit target, but that will come at the cost of growth. So the dynamic is such that you go for growth or you go for fiscal consolidation. The balance is very difficult at most times, even in normal times, and these are times. So they've chosen growth, not this year, the previous year, the year before.
Does that mean the willingness to live with higher inflation?
I wouldn't know if it's
because there is already inflationary pressures.
Inflation is set to go up even further.
Oil at $90 a
yes,
barrel.
Oil at $90, imported inflation will go up, and all the money you're pumping into the economy is going to cause inflation domestically as well. That's something that you need to live with. You need to handle it. It's like treating a sick patient, right? You give them X medicine, it causes a Y reaction. You give a medicine for the Y reaction, and then you give them a steroid. You have to handle the reactions that come by. But the idea is to ensure the sick patient gets out of the ICU.
Then again, I feel this will create criticism that this government is not pro-poor enough. That it doesn't bother enough about the inflationary pressures experienced by the poor and the lower middle class.
I see your point. Inflation hits the poor the most. It's a sad thing for them. They have tried to. Through the pandemic, as I said, this government doesn't believe in handouts, so they're taking care of it by giving away stuff in kind. But going forward, they need to devise more such programs in which the poor can be firewalled from the inflationary pressures.
Well, hopefully, all this spending actually results in job creation in the construction sector.
Yes.
The big irrigation schemes that the government has outlined.
It should. As we have seen, the roads. She's talking of 25,000 kilometers to be added next year, which is a quantum jump. I think last year, if I'm right, between April and December, about 5,000 odd kilometers or 6,000 odd kilometers were built. So you can imagine what's the jump in the next fiscal year. That will create jobs by itself, not just in construction, also in the materials, construction materials. Cement companies will need more capacity, steel companies will need more capacity, transport companies, the tippers and the earth movers and others which are used in road construction. I'm only taking up road construction as one example.
In fact, last week you interviewed Nitin Gadkari, and it was very clear that this government sees big infrastructure push as the engine driving the economy.
Exactly.
He made the same point about
and that's the right way to
and
go.
waterways and irrigation programs intended to double farm income or increase farm prosperity.
That's the right way to go. It has the double benefit of getting the country infrastructure up
Asset
to
creation, tangible
standards,
asset creation.
and also assets are being created. And secondly, it also provides jobs and it creates a demand for commodities, primary commodities, right? Like cement, steel, sand, and all that. So it's a good strategy, pushing infrastructure, which is what all the pundits have been asking for. So she's delivered on what the pundits wanted.
Right. One big miss in the budget speech seems to be just a passing mention about the LIC IPO and not any articulation about disinvestment.
No, your question has two parts, right? One is disinvestment per se. The second is about LIC. About LIC, she started at the beginning of the speech. She mentioned that LIC IPO will happen shortly. And if you look at the numbers, this year's revised estimates for disinvestment is about 78,000 crores or 75,000, somewhere in that range. And they have collected about 9 to 12,000 crores this year till now. So the remainder has to be LIC. 66,000 crores has to be LIC. Next year, their target is 65,000 crores from disinvestment. I think that's a conservative and well set target, because we have seen governments, not just this government, governments before that, consecutively setting highly ambitious disinvestment targets and failing to meet them, because it's not easy. There are several things in disinvestment which are outside the government's control, right? So this year they had 210,000 crore target, and it's been revised to 78,000 crores. So they've learned from that experience and they've targeted only 65,000 crores. Actually, disinvestment is an example of a lot of numbers in this budget, which I think follows a classic Narayana Murthy Infosys. His philosophy has always been to under-promise and over-deliver. Now, you look at last year's numbers, revenues were very conservatively set, and the government has exceeded that.
Is that making a virtue out of the inability to?
Well, it depends on how you want to look at it. You want to look at half glass empty, then that's the way you look at it. I would look at half glass full. So I would say that it's realistic. We have had in this country for far too long numbers in budgets which are undependable, which are either ambitious or downright
lacking credibility.
Yeah. So that way, the last 2 years, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman has her endeavor has been to bring in some credibility into the numbers, which is accepted widely. Left and right wing, everybody says the numbers are more credible in terms of there's no extra budgetary numbers as they used to be in the past. Even the BJP government itself has had extra budgetary numbers. So it's not as if they are being saints and the others were sinners. They've all done that. So to that extent, it's acknowledgement that this is a reality. Face up to it. And we'll try to best it. If you best it, it's good. But if you fail, you at least meet the reality.
No, you are a chartered accountant by training. This budget seems to have a remarkable status quo on taxes. It seems that there's nothing in Part B. There's not even a mention of salaried taxpayers. There seems to be not even a shred of a carrot for people like you and me. Is this the new normal in the post GST world, that taxes, there is nothing much to look forward in terms of tax proposals?
Well,
is it a good thing?
See, GST is outside the purview of the budget, right? There's nothing that can be done with the GST in the budget. It's with a council of state finance ministers and the GST council, which is what it's called. So leave GST out. Income taxes, yes, I'm personally disappointed because at the highest tax bracket, I don't get anything. But so is the person at the lowest tax bracket. He's also not getting anything. There was some expectation that there would be a tweak of the standard deduction to reduce tax on the entry level and the middle level taxpayers. That has not happened. Obviously, she couldn't do that because she needs the money. If you're increasing capital expenditure by 35%, you need to bring the money from somewhere, right? So it is disappointing, yes. And but over the last few years, the salaried class has not got anything in budgets. It's not this one. If you take the last 3 budgets, except for that September 2019 event, which was not in the budget, it was outside the budget, where she brought in a new tax scheme. And it was announced in the budget in 2020, if I'm right, where she brought in a new tax scheme where you can avail of lower taxes at select brackets if you decide to forego exemptions and deductions. Apart from that, there's been nothing. So she's probably waiting for people to move to the new tax scheme. So that's the only way you can.
It's a thank you card the middle class has been expecting, which hasn't arrived in the mailbox.
It hasn't arrived the last 3 years, not just this year.
Raghuvir, in an editorial recently, BusinessLine argued for high tax on cryptocurrency income.
We did.
Almost like a punitive tax. Do you think this 30% tax on virtual digital assets is a sin tax on the lines of what we argued?
I don't want to get into this definitions of sin tax or saint tax, but the fact is that we did argue for a tax, and I'm sure all the crypto investors will be out with their knives. But what we said is this animal is there, right? Cryptocurrency is being traded. I mean, crypto trading happens. And why do you want to look the other way? Accept that the animal is there and see how to handle that animal. And if I, as the government, can extract my pound of flesh from that animal, do it. And if that will dissuade the animal from getting too aggressive, then you get the best of both worlds. See, what has happened here is this crypto tax. 30% will go to the government for every transaction where there is a gain. And in a falling market, as it has been over the last 2.5, 3 months in cryptocurrencies, if you are a crypto trader and your asset is sitting on losses, you're not going to consider fresh investment. And if I consider that I have to pay 30% on whatever gains I'm sitting on too, then I'm totally dissuaded from going for fresh investments. So this is a way of also telling the market that, okay, please sober down. But for me, as the government, if I'm the government, if I'm the finance minister, this is a piece of cake waiting there. Money is being traded in billions, millions, and which is not being taxed. And why should I let it go? So the question is, a lot of people have been asking on Twitter after the budget was presented, whether this means that cryptos are being legalized.
Is it sort of a de facto legalization? Is taxation a recognition of something's legality?
No. If you go by the Income Tax Act, there's the definition of income under the Income Tax Act says anything that is earned, any income. That's an all-pervasive definition. It's legal income, illegal income as well. So there are Supreme Court judgments to the effect that money earned from smuggling can be taxed. So smuggling is hardly legal, right? Smuggling is illegal. So illegal money income can also be taxed. So if you look at it from that perspective, crypto income, just because you're taxing it, it doesn't confer a legality on it. What it confers is acknowledgement. And if I to step up that word a little bit more from acknowledgement, it's a recognition that, okay, this exists and this is happening in the market. But whether it is legal or illegal is not decided by the income taxation. It's decided by separate law, which the government is working on. So it is a gray area. I mean, in the sense that by taxing it, the government says, I'm acknowledging the existence of crypto assets, but I'm not conferring legality. Because under the Income Tax Act, any income is to be taxed.
Right. Raghu, thanks a lot for joining us today on this YouTube Live. Make sure that you follow businessline.in for all the latest update, and make sure you pick up the copy of BusinessLine tomorrow morning.
Yes, please follow BusinessLine, and you will get, it's a one-stop shop for all your budget questions.